Rate limiting. The concept of rate limiting means that we have a few servers and there are requests that are coming, of course, to the servers, to the cluster, to the load balancer. So there are coming a lot of requests. And of course, we want our servers to keep with the pace. But what happens if there is a spike, for example? Or what happens if our service does not manage to answer all of these requests? One of the applications is becoming busy. So this is the case for a rate limiting. In a perfect world, we would not need any rate limiting because we would be able to answer any rate that is asked by the client. But we are not in a perfect world. And therefore, because we want our service to be resilient to such cases, which means if we serve 100 requests per minute and then suddenly we have a spike, then either we were already able to handle this, but we want to take care of the case that we were not able to handle this. Also, there could be a bug on the client side. And the client side could suddenly have an infinite loop and call us 10,000 times a second instead of 100. So this is the use case for rate limiting. Basically, it's a guardrail that we want to impose on our service and tell it, this is what makes sense for the rate of the request to come to our services, and limit it. So we can have one global rate limiter, but in many cases, our services have multiple clients. So we could have client of type A, client of type B. Let's say that we have a bicycle service where we rent bikes, and we could have events coming directly from the bike renters. We could have calls coming from the bike renters. We can have events, requests coming from some bicycle service if we have service providers that provides these bike services all around the world. And we could have requests from other services. So we don't, usually in these cases, we don't want to impose one global rate limiting because we could have 30 types of clients, okay? And one client could call us once per day, and another client could call us once per second. And so these have different limiting factors. So we want to impose rate limiting per client usually in these cases. And not only do we want to impose the rate limiting per client, we might want to have it dynamic. Okay, so let's begin by clarifying some additional things about this rate limiting. We said that we have clients that call our service. We said that we have multiple types of clients with different rate limiting needs that call our service. We said that one client could call our service once per day, another client could call our service once per hour, and another client could call our service 100 times per second. So the first question is, why not just scale up our service to answer all these requirements? So this would be good in a perfect world, but in a real world, if we use, for example, autoscale, then this takes time. It takes time for system to autoscale, to start nodes, to start the service. So we still want a rate limiting. Also, there could be a bug on the client side. So we do want to limit the rate if the client for some reason calls us 100 times, 100,000 times per second. Also, we could say, okay, so this is not a problem of our service. Let the load balancer limit the rate. The problem with asking the load balancer is that it's not really, it would be great if it could do it, but it has no knowledge of the underlying application servers. Usually it does not know what is their performance. It does not differentiate in between operations. It's usually the developer that is working on the actual application server has all this knowledge on which type of clients we have, and this is not part of the load balancer. Another thing we could do is we could do this throttling, this rate limiting per each host. This would be great if the number of requests was spread equally in between the hosts. But again, as we said, we're not in perfect world, and one host could get this type of request and another host could get this type. Also, one host could get busy. Okay, it could get busy and now it's able to serve 1 request per second instead of 10. So we want the servers to share the information on their performance so that we can decide on what is the current global rate limiting that we can serve based on the actual dynamic performance of the hosts. And the API would look like for each request that comes in, can I allow this request? So we can imagine a method of allow request that takes a single parameter of a request and decides with the Boolean whether to allow this request or do not allow this request. And we don't want this method to interfere with the actual business logic of our application.